Valentine's Day remains a bittersweet occasion for the people in a small village in South Warwickshire. Some locals have even been known to plan annual trips away, just so they aren't around when February the 14th comes around. The village is home of a brutal murder that local authorities were unable to come up with a suspect or motive for. However, the investigation into this particular murder would soon take an unexpectedly strange turn. Rumours of witchcraft, spectral black dogs, and ritual sacrifice would surround the case as it became entangled in the dark folklore and history of the region. Was this work of a lone madman or something far more sinister? So let's take a look at the small village of Lower Quentin today and delve into the mystery, the facts, and the legends of the Valentine's Day murder. The murder victim at the heart of this gruesome and mysterious tale was 75-year-old Charles Walton, a farm labourer who had lived in Lower Quentin all his life. He shared a cottage opposite the village church with his niece Edie. The cottage is still there today, although it's now been converted from 3 small cottages into one large one. Despite Charles being a bit of an older gentleman, he continued to help out in the local farms until the day of his murder. He was a real countryman and he knew many rural tales and the old ways of the countryside. He was well liked in the village, although it's said he was an unusual character. Some of the rumours that circulated were that birds would flock to be fed from his hands. It was said that he had the ability to tame dogs with his voice. He was meant to breed natterjack toads in his garden. Pretty funky. And apparently the year before his death was a difficult harvest and the beer brewed from his crops was undrinkable. On the day of his murder, 14th of February 1945, Charles was trimming hedges on the edge of a field at the bottom of Meon Hill with his pitchfork and trouncing hook. Later, when his body was found, villagers were shocked at the savage and downright bizarre nature of the unusual murder. Walton's throat had been cut 3 times with his own hook. The wounds were so deep that they nearly severed his head from his body. Oh my god, what the hell was going on? He had also been brutally beaten, leaving his skull split, 3 ribs broken, and heavy bruising on his body. Now, you thought that was bad? It gets even worse. The final gruesome act was his pitchfork had been thrust down through the lower part of his face with such force that it left his body pinned to the ground in what appeared to be a deliberate position. His head forced back, opening up the wounds on his neck almost to drain the body of blood. Witchcraft was suspected because of the large cross that was carved into his chest. Previous similar cases documented include people murdering those they believe to have put them under a spell. In these cases, the victim, believed to be the witch who's cast the spell, was often given the sign of the cross by the person taking their revenge. With rumours of Charles and witchcraft, did someone have some kind of misfortune in life and blamed him for putting on some kind of spell on them? As mentioned earlier about the crops not growing well, author Margaret Murray of the popular The Witch Cult in Western Europe believed the Walton murder was actually a ritual act, performed with the purpose of replenishing the soil to allow good crop growth. Meon Hill, where Charles' body was found, has been surrounded by strange tales for centuries. Whispers of the devil himself and ancient hauntings. One legend from the 8th century says the devil kicked a boulder from the top of the hill, intending to smash the newly built Evesham Abbey. The legend tells that his angry deed was thwarted by locals' prayers and the stone instead fell elsewhere. People then carved the stone into the shape of a cross to rid it of evil from the devil's touch. Now, there is another version of the tale which I always find funny, like how is there 2 versions of the story? But the other version of the tale says the devil threw a large lump of earth to smother the newly built abbey. However, the Bishop of Worcester saw the devil and with the power of prayer altered the devil's aim. In this version, the lump fell short short of its target and actually formed Meon Hill. There's also legends of phantom hounds from a Celtic kin that are said to hunt the hill on the night. The king was the lord of departed spirits who would hunt to gather souls, riding a pale horse and accompanied by his white hounds. As well as the king's white hounds, the mysterious large black dogs with red eyes have also been sighted in the area on many occasions. A common English folktale, often thought to be a demonic hellhound known as the Black Shuck. With no immediate leads, it soon became apparent to local authorities that outside assistance would be needed. Detective Chief Inspector Robert Fabian, the top detective of his day, took this as his final case. He was an aging celebrity detective of the era who very strangely bought into the hype that he was the reincarnation of Sherlock Holmes. Out of this strange tale of the devil, hellhounds and things, I think that's the bit that actually makes me laugh the most. So, Robert and his partner Albert Webb were soon dispatched by Scotland Yard and tasked with bringing Walton's killer, or killers, to justice. To the surprise of Detective Fabian, not a single person came forward with any information. He and his partner personally interviewed nearly 500 locals during their investigation, only to be left with more questions than answers. Fabian noted that no one seemed to fear for their safety, which you'd think would be very odd, right? An elderly member of this small community had been violently butchered in broad daylight, and there was little concern of a madman on the loose. Were they frightened or suspicious of outsiders? Were they bound by some secret oath? Fabian was convinced that the residents of Lower Quinton were hiding something. Left frustrated by his interviews and with few clues that could help bring light to the case, he began to look into both the personal life of Charles Walton and the history of the region. He acquired a book that spoke about various folk stories and superstitions unique to the region, many of which seem to tap into a broader sense of darkness that permeates the area. For centuries, the county has been known as a hotbed of witchcraft and paranormal activity, and to some degree continued to be steeped in these beliefs at the time of Walton's murder. Given the unusual, almost ritualistic nature of the killing, Fabian began to consider the possibility that witchcraft had some role to play. He also openly spoke about a possible broader conspiracy at work in the village. The theory seemed far-fetched at first, but there were certain details that would continue to point the case in that direction, including the background of Charles Walton himself. From what little information locals offered up, a curious assessment of his character started to emerge. Most described him as an eccentric but solitary man. However, as mentioned earlier, there were some who spoke of him in a fearful way and claimed that he possessed certain powers. It was said that the old man was gifted with a unique ability to communicate with animals. As a young man, Walton was alleged to have been an accomplished horse whisperer, someone able to control horses through hand and eye motions. According to witness accounts, Walton had been seen on many occasions imitating the songs of the nightingale and chirping to other species of birds. The strange thing was, they seemed to obey his requests to stop eating the seeds sown in the fields of his little plot. There was also talk of Walton being a clairvoyant and seer of spirits. Interestingly, an example of his supposed clairvoyant powers was documented in a book of local folklore. Yeah, that is pretty odd, isn't it? So there's some written documentation of him maybe being able to see spirits. A quote from the book said, "A plough lad named Charles Walton met a black dog on his way home 9 times in successive evenings. On the 9th encounter, a headless lady rustled past him in a silk dress, and on the next day he heard of his sister's death." The paranormal encounter stained Walton's soul, according to his superstitious-minded neighbours, imbuing the already strangely gifted child with even darker powers such as the evil eye, the ability to place a curse through hypnotic gaze. Some villagers came to believe he was a witch. During the search of Walton's residence following the murder, it was discovered that the back garden was overrun with large natterjack toads. Why was this strange though? Well, rumour had it that the old man was breeding the creatures for nefarious purposes. The natterjack features prominently in records of British witchcraft. There was a ritual known as the Toad Bone Ritual. Once complete, The bones were used as a talisman to give the owner power over horses. During the 16th century, the toads were collected and burned as familiars of witches. The rural landscape around there has always provided fertile ground for tales involving witches, phantom coaches, headless horsemen, and of course a ghostly woman in white, mysterious black dogs, fairies, and various demonic entities. It's also a region where outdated folk beliefs and traditions, long since discarded elsewhere in Britain, actually persisted. Some say Meon Hill, where the murder took place, is an evil place, a gateway to hell. It's located in an area dotted with Neolithical and Bronze Age burial mounds and the remnants of various Iron Age and Roman encampments. From the time of these ancient inhabitants and throughout the ages since, the entire area has been associated with dark and supernatural forces. As already mentioned, a young Charles Walton was haunted by a black dog in the days leading up to his sister's death. A lifetime later, during the investigation into his murder, another mysterious black dog encounter would take place. While he was in Lower Quentin, Detective Fabian's investigation would bring him through St. Swithin's Cemetery and into the fields surrounding Meon Hill. On a nearby stone wall, he noticed a peculiar black dog following his movements. A moment later, it was gone. When he left the field, a boy was walking nearby and Detective Fabian asked him if he was looking for his dog. The boy was confused. Like, bro, what are you talking about? So the detective said, "The black dog, lad. Is it yours?" On hearing this, the boy turned pale and fled in panic. Word soon spread throughout the village that the detective had seen the hellhound. A series of strange incidents would happen in the days following this phantom black dog encounter. The next morning began with the discovery that a cow seemingly had just dropped dead in one of the grazing fields around Meon Hill. Later that day, as Fabian attempted to conduct more interviews, he noted that the entire atmosphere of the village had changed. In his memoirs, he writes, "When we walked into the village pub, that evening silence felt like a physical blow. Cottage doors shut in our faces, and even the most innocent witness seemed unable to meet our eyes. Some became ill after we spoke to them. A few days later, a black dog was found dead and hanging from a tree near the spot where Charles Walton's body had been discovered weeks earlier." This was likely a sick prank played on Fabian by some locals following the news of his sighting. However, maybe it was a warning. The cross symbol carved into his chest strengthened the claim that it was a witch killing. For centuries, Christian folk superstition has held to the belief that the sign of the cross could be used as divine protection against malevolent forces or spell casting, particularly in defending against the evil eye. During Warwickshire's witch hunting past, a more overtly religious form of blooding included carving a cross directly onto the body of a witch in order to nullify their diabolical powers. It was discovered that 75 years prior, in the neighbouring village of Long Compton, an elderly woman named Anne Tennant was attacked and killed with a pitchfork by a farmhand named Haywood. According to court records, Haywood believed Tennant was one of 16 witches who lived in the village. He believed that she possessed the power of the evil eye, and that she had bewitched the cattle and the land of local farmers. More directly personal, he also blamed her spellcasting for a death in his family and severe cramping that prevented him from working in the fields. Haywood defended his actions to the court, explaining how he felt it was his duty to protect the community from Tennant's black magic. To prove the righteousness of his cause, he insisted that the judge dig up the old woman's corpse. He said they should weigh it against a church Bible to confirm that she was indeed a proper witch. Of course, the judge declined that offer and instead charged him with manslaughter. He was later found to be criminally insane and lived out his remaining days at the Broadmoor Criminal Lunatic Asylum. Although James Haywood was ruled to be a man who suffered from delusions, his belief in witches was in fact shared by many people in the community. So, was Charles Walton England's last witch killing, as many have claimed. Initially, there was some suspicion placed on his employer, a farmer named Alfred Potter, who owned the land where the murder had taken place, but he was soon cleared. Further rounds of questioning also provided no new information. Before slamming the door on detectives, one elderly villager shouted, "He's been dead a month, man! What are you worried about?" The Walton case would be Chief Inspector Robert Fabian's single unsolved murder throughout his long career with Scotland Yard. It's a mystery that still lingers on after almost 80 years, and to this day the case continues to be the oldest unsolved case on record with the Warwickshire police. Wow, that is pretty crazy, isn't it? How it's just gone unsolved. What actually happened? Who slit his throat so brutally? Who shoved the pitchfork through his face? And who carved this cross into his chest? The thing is though, in one final mystery, Charles Walton's corpse would eventually go missing. He'd been buried in St. Swithin's cemetery, in the churchyard directly across from his cottage, and a short walk from the field where his body was found. But there's no longer a gravestone that bears his name, and no one can seem to remember exactly where the plot was located. It's assumed that the villagers of Lower Quentin had just become tired of being associated with the infamous occult murder and removed the marker to discourage people, probably like me, who would go there and disrupt the peace of the cemetery. Now, of course, I wouldn't go there and disrupt the peace, but you know what people are like. The thing is, though, the graves could also just be lost due to some churchyard renovations that happened 50 years after his death. Or maybe his remains have just been removed altogether and transferred to some other location. With no surviving family, Charles Walton's memory will simply live on as another dark chapter in the records of Warwickshire legend and folklore. And whoever spilled his blood on that faithful February day will forever remain lost to the shadows. Wow, so a pretty insane murder with ties to witchcraft and the occult. I just thought that was a cool story which happened on Valentine's Day to share on Valentine's Day with you guys. I hope everyone is doing good today. I hope everyone's alright. Thank you for watching the video. If you've made it this far, you're an absolute legend. If you haven't, please just make sure to drop a like on this. That would really help me out. And subscribe if you're not. You may as well, because it's absolutely free and you can see more videos like this in the future. Or if you want to go back and take a look at some more, there's plenty to take a look at. Thank you so much, and I will see you in the next one.